January 3rd, 1945. 0417 hours. A German sergeant named Klaus Weber lit a cigarette inside his King Tiger tank, shielding the flame with his glove. His loader laughed at some dirty joke. Neither man heard the whistle. 48 American 155mm shells struck their column at the exact same second. Weber's tank lifted 3 meters off the frozen road and came down as a shower of burning steel. Up and down the mile-long convoy, fuel trucks detonated in chains of orange fire. SS, Captain Heinrich Vogel, riding in the third half-track, opened his mouth to scream an order and was cut in half by a piece of flying axle. 600 men died in under 20 seconds. The lieutenant commanding Fire Direction Center spoke one sentence into his radio. "Target destroyed. Request new coordinates." This was Patton's war, and it was about to turn against Patton's own allies. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss our next deep dive. Join us as we uncover more untold stories, historic events, and unforgettable moments from the past. Become part of the community. 4 days later, a British field marshal would speak 45 minutes into a microphone. Those 45 minutes would nearly destroy the Grand Alliance. Patton would slam a resignation letter on Eisenhower's desk. Bradley would follow. Churchill would be woken at dawn. And in the snowy woods outside Bastogne, American GIs would hear the betrayal on captured German radios and consider turning their rifles the wrong way. December 19th, 1944. Verdun. A coal stove hissed in the corner of a freezing French barracks. Eisenhower looked across the table at 6 exhausted generals. The present situation is to be regarded as one of opportunity for us, and not of disaster. Silence. Then Patton grinned. "Hell, let's have the guts to let the bastards go all the way to Paris. Then we'll really cut them off and chew them up." Nobody laughed. Eisenhower tapped his pencil twice. "George, how soon can you attack?" Patton had been waiting for this question for 3 years. The morning of December 22nd, with 3 divisions. The British liaison officer actually gasped. Bradley leaned forward. "George, that's 100 miles in snow. That's insane." Patton never took his eyes off Eisenhower. "Ike, 3 divisions, December 22nd. My word on it." Eisenhower nodded once. The meeting ended. Outside in the courtyard, Patton grabbed his chief of staff by the sleeve. "Hap, I want every truck rolling by midnight. Every single one. I don't care if we have to shoot the drivers to keep them awake." Colonel Paul Harkins nodded. "Yes, sir." Patton stared into the falling snow. "These krauts have stuck their head in the meat grinder, and I've got hold of the handle." In 72 hours, Patton pivoted 133,000 men 90 degrees across frozen roads and smashed into the German southern flank. On the day after Christmas, his tanks reached Bastogne. Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe walked out of his cellar headquarters, saw the 1st Sherman rolling into town, and said only, "Hello." The 101st was saved. Patton went to his trailer that night, poured 3 fingers of bourbon, and wrote in his diary, "The relief of Bastogne is the most brilliant operation we have thus far performed. I think it is the outstanding achievement of this war." He stared at the page. Then he added one more line. "This is my high point." He underlined it twice. He did not yet know how right he was, because while Patton was saving an American division, a British field marshal, 200 kilometers to the north, was preparing to steal his glory. Bernard Law Montgomery, 57 years old, a vicar's son from Kennington. A man so vain his own chief of staff called him in private letters impossible to serve. On December 20th, Eisenhower had given Montgomery temporary command of 2 American armies in the northern sector. It was a logistical decision, nothing more. German penetration had severed Bradley's communications with his northern units, and someone had to command them. Eisenhower explained this on the telephone with his usual careful diplomacy. Montgomery hung up, turned to his aide, and said, "The Americans have got themselves into a proper muddle. I shall have to tidy it up." His aide wrote the sentence down. He would later regret it, because Montgomery began repeating that phrase, tidy up, tidy up, tidy up, to visiting British officers, to press correspondents, to his own American subordinates who stared at him with the cold, patient eyes of men who had just lost 19,000 brothers in 3 weeks. Lieutenant General Courtney Hodges, commander of the U.S. First Army, walked out of his first meeting with Montgomery, got into his staff car, and vomited in the snow. Patton's plan was a guillotine. Simultaneous attack from north and south. Close the base of the salient at St. Vith. Trap 100,000 Germans inside a kill sack. Annihilate them before they could retreat behind the Siegfried Line. On January 1, 1945, Patton sent a coded message to Hodges in the north. Ready to drive. Request you drive south to meet me. Speed is everything. Hodges never got the message personally. It went to Montgomery. Montgomery read it, set it aside, and said, "We shall attack when I am satisfied with the preparations." 3 days passed. Patton paced his headquarters. What in the name of God is Monty doing? His G2 Colonel Oscar Koch shrugged. Waiting, sir. Patton threw a map across the room. Every hour we wait, Model pulls another panzer division out of the pocket. We are losing this battle by the clock, Oscar. By the goddamn clock. On January 3rd, Montgomery finally attacked, at 2 kilometers a day. Patton, reading the daily progress report, sat down slowly on the edge of his cot. His aide, Colonel Charles Codman, had never seen him sit down in the middle of a briefing. "Charlie, he's letting them escape. That English son of a bitch is letting them walk away." January 7th, 1945. Zonhoven, Holland, a converted schoolhouse. 50 war correspondents crammed into wooden chairs meant for Dutch children. Montgomery stepped behind a table wearing his parachute regiment beret tilted at a studied angle. He smiled. He actually smiled. "Gentlemen, the battle has been a most interesting one, perhaps one of the most interesting I have ever handled." A young American reporter from the Associated Press began writing. Montgomery continued for 45 minutes. He used the word "I" 74 times. He used the word Eisenhower once. He used the word Patton 0 times. He described the American First Army as, quote, "fighting chaps getting a bit confused." He described his own role as, quote, "taking a firm grip on the battle and employing the Americans to their best advantage." In the back of the room, British war correspondent Alan Moorhead lowered his pencil. He would later write in his memoir, "I felt sick. I understood in that moment that Montgomery had just handed Joseph Goebbels the greatest propaganda gift of the war." By midnight, Radio Berlin was broadcasting the speech in English, re-edited to make every American officer sound like an incompetent schoolboy saved by British genius. January 8th, 6:40 hours. Patton's forward headquarters, Luxembourg City. Colonel Codman handed Patton the transcript. Patton read it standing. His face went white, then red, then a color Codman had never seen on a living human being. Patton spoke very quietly. "Charlie." "Sir." "Get me Bradley, now." The call lasted 22 minutes. Bradley's voice came through the field telephone flat and cold. "George, did you read it?" "I read it." "He's claiming he saved us." "I know what he's claiming." Long silence. Then Bradley, the quietest man in the American Army, said something Patton would remember for the rest of his life. "George, I will resign my commission before I serve under that man one more day." Patton closed his eyes. "Brad, if you resign, I resign." Another silence. "Then we resign together." Patton hung up. He stood alone in his trailer for 90 seconds. Then he sat down at his field desk, pulled out a sheet of command stationery, and began to write. His handwriting, normally precise, came out in jagged slashes. 12 lines. No greeting, no closing pleasantries. Just 12 lines that would land on Eisenhower's desk within 6 hours and nearly end the war in the West. January 8th, 1915 hours, Versailles, the Trianon Palace. Eisenhower sat alone. In front of him, 2 resignation letters, Patton's and Bradley's. Outside, a cold rain fell on the gravel drive. His aide commander, Harry Butcher, knocked once and entered. "Ike, General Marshal is on the scrambler from Washington. He's been woken up. He wants to know what the hell is happening." Eisenhower did not look up. "Tell him I'll call him in 10 minutes. Butcher hesitated. "Ike, are you all right?" Eisenhower finally raised his head. His eyes were red. "Harry, I have spent 3 years building this alliance. 3 years convincing Americans to trust Englishmen and Englishmen to trust Americans. And in 45 minutes, one vain little man just about burned the whole thing down." He picked up Patton's letter. Read it again. Set it down. Picked up the telephone. Placed a call to London. Field Marshal Alan Brooke came on the line within 4 minutes. Eisenhower's voice was calm. Too calm. "Alan, I want you to listen very carefully. Montgomery will issue a public correction within 24 hours. He will praise American forces by name. He will credit Bradley and Patton by name. Or I am going to the combined chiefs tomorrow morning and asking them to choose between Montgomery and me, because they cannot have both." Brooke stammered. "Ike, this is extraordinary." "Yes, Alan, it is. 24 hours. He hung up. By midnight, Winston Churchill was awake in the cabinet war rooms, reading the transcript of Montgomery's press conference with his reading glasses perched on his nose. He finished. He looked up at Brooke. His voice was soft. "The vain fool. The vain, vain fool." He poured himself a brandy with a hand that trembled slightly. "Alan, get me Eisenhower. I shall personally clean up this mess in the House of Commons within 48 hours. And tell Montgomery from me that if he opens his mouth in public again about this battle, I shall relieve him myself and send him home to count sheep in Hampshire." Brooke almost smiled. Almost. And somewhere in the freezing forests east of Bastogne Field, Marshal Walter Model listened to an intercepted American radio signal, heard the shouting between headquarters, and lowered his map case slowly. "Mein Gott," he whispered to his chief of staff. "The Americans are tearing each other apart. If this continues for 72 hours, we win." He did not know he had 24 hours. He did not know Churchill was already dressing. He did not know that Eisenhower, at that exact moment, was drafting the coldest, most surgical diplomatic ultimatum of his entire career. And he did not know that George S. Patton, alone in his trailer in Luxembourg, had just sworn a private oath that would shape the final 4 months of the war. Patton would not forgive. Patton would not forget. And when Patton's chance came to make Montgomery pay, he would take it with a fury that would shock even Eisenhower himself. But would the alliance survive the next 24 hours? Would Churchill save his field marshal in time? And when Patton finally got his revenge, what would it cost the Third Reich? January 8, 1945. 22 hours earlier, Field Marshal Montgomery had claimed credit for an American victory in front of 50 war correspondents. 22 hours earlier, Patton and Bradley had submitted resignation letters. And 22 hours earlier, Eisenhower had given Field Marshal Alan Brooke exactly 24 hours to make Montgomery apologize, or the Grand Alliance died. Now the clock was bleeding down. 200 British soldiers had died in the Ardennes. 19,000 Americans had died. And in the cabinet war rooms beneath Whitehall, Winston Churchill was reaching for a cigar with a trembling hand. Because Churchill had just realized something terrifying. His own field marshal, the hero of El Alamein, might have to be publicly humiliated in front of the world. Or the alliance collapsed. Or Hitler won the war by watching his enemies destroy each other. And inside Montgomery's trailer in Holland, the field marshal himself was still asleep, still convinced he had done nothing wrong. And this is where everything got worse. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss our next deep dive. Join us as we uncover more untold stories, historic events, and unforgettable moments from the past. Become part of the community. 03:15 hours, Cabinet War Rooms, London. Brooke walked in looking like a man attending his own funeral. Churchill looked up from the transcript. Alan, is he mad? Actually mad? Brooke hesitated. Prime Minister, Bernard does not understand how he appears to other men. Churchill laughed once, a single dry, terrible laugh. He called American soldiers confused. He took credit for Bastogne. He implied Bradley was incompetent, and you call that not understanding. Churchill crossed the room, stopped at the map. Alan, I am going to the House of Commons within 36 hours. I shall praise the American armies by name. Bradley. Patton. Bastogne. I shall call it an ever-famous American victory. And if Bernard so much as tilts his beret in public before I finish that speech, I shall break him. Personally. Do you understand? Brooke nodded. I understand, Prime Minister. 4:45 hours. Zonhoven, Holland. Montgomery's aide knocked on the bedroom door. Field Marshal, London. The CIGS, urgent. Montgomery came to the phone in his dressing gown. Brooke's voice was ice. Bernard, listen. Do not speak. Do not argue. Patton has resigned. Bradley has resigned. Eisenhower has given me 24 hours. You will write an apology letter before dawn. You will praise Bradley. You will praise Patton by name. You will admit the Americans won this battle. Montgomery's voice came back defensive. Alan, I gave that press conference to defend American forces. They misunderstood. Bernard. Brooke almost never raised his voice. This is not about being right. This is about whether your own Prime Minister relieves you of command in 48 hours. Silence on the line. Then Montgomery, in a voice his own aides had never heard before, said, I do not know how to write such a letter, Alan. Then find someone who does. Find Freddie. Now. The line went dead. Montgomery sat on the edge of his bed holding the dead receiver. For the first time in his life, Bernard Law Montgomery was afraid. Not of bullets, not of Germans, of being remembered as the man who lost the alliance. But Montgomery had one friend left in the world. One man who could save him. Major General Francis Freddie de Guingand, 44 years old. Montgomery's chief of staff since North Africa. The one man in the British Army who could tell Bernard Law Montgomery the truth without being fired on the spot. Sick with a chest infection. Sleeping 3 hours a night. Shaken awake at 5:20 in his billet. Freddie, the field marshal needs you. De Guingand sat up, coughed. What has he done now? He gave a press conference, sir. Oh, Christ. 5:45 hours. Montgomery sat at his desk holding a blank sheet of paper. He looked up. For the first time in 3 years, de Guingand saw something new in his commander's eyes. Fear. Freddie, they want me to apologize. To Patton. Long pause. Yes, Bernard. Especially to Patton. Montgomery slammed his hand on the desk. Patton is a vulgarian, a cowboy. I shall not... Bernard, listen to me. De Guingand sat down slowly. His voice became the voice of a man talking a jumper down off a ledge. I have watched you win battles no other British general could have won. But in the next 6 hours, you will write the greatest apology of your career, or the only name history remembers from this battle will be Patton. Not you, not El Alamein, not Normandy, just Patton. Montgomery went very still. Freddie, help me write it. The letter took 43 minutes. 3 paragraphs. Every word stripped of vanity of ego of Bernard Law Montgomery's entire personality. De Guingand folded it into his flight jacket. Bernard, if he refuses, if Eisenhower refuses, then I get down on my knees, Ike. I will beg if I have to. He left at 06:32 for the airfield. The day of reckoning had arrived. If this failed, the alliance died in 12 hours. 9:15 hours. Versailles. The Trianon Palace. De Guingand walked through the front doors of SHAEF headquarters after a 3-hour flight through freezing fog. His chest burned. He had not slept. He carried one folded letter. Commander Butcher met him in the hallway. Freddie, He's waiting. How is he? Angry, tired. Patton's and Bradley's letters are on his desk, still unopened. De Guingand walked into Eisenhower's office. Eisenhower stood at the window, back turned. Freddie, Ike, you have 60 seconds before I pick up that telephone and tell George Marshal to find me a new commander for the Northern Group of Armies. De Guingand pulled the letter from his jacket, placed it on the desk next to the 2 unopened resignation letters. Then he did something no British general had ever done in the presence of an American Supreme Commander. He sat down on the edge of Eisenhower's desk. Like a brother, like a man with nothing left to lose. Ike, read it, please. Just read it. Eisenhower turned. His eyes went to the letter. He opened it. He read it slowly. The color came back into his face by degrees. He finished. Sat down in his own chair. Freddie, did Bernard write this? He signed it Ike. Did he write it? Ike, please. Eisenhower exhaled. For the first time in 15 hours, his shoulders dropped. Tell Bernard the letter is accepted. Tell him to give a public statement within 24 hours, crediting Bradley and Patton, by name, in that order. Yes, Ike. And Freddie. Yes. Thank you. You just saved the war in the West. De Guingand nodded once, walked out of the room, collapsed against the wall of the corridor, coughed blood into his handkerchief. 1100 hours. Eisenhower called Patton on the scrambler. George, it's over. Monty apologized. Churchill is giving a speech in the Commons tomorrow crediting you and Brad by name. I need your letter back. Long silence. Then Patton, low and furious. Ike, he actually apologized. Yes, George. Freddie flew in this morning. I have it in writing. Another silence. Then tear the damn letter up, Ike. Already done, George. Patton hung up without saying goodbye. January 9th, 1945. 15:30 hours. Westminster. House of Commons. Churchill stood at the dispatch box. His voice, thickened by brandy and age, filled the chamber. I have seen it suggested that the terrific battle on the American front is an Anglo-American battle. In fact, the United States troops have done almost all the fighting and have suffered almost all the losses. Care must be taken in telling our proud tale not to claim for the British Army an undue share of what is undoubtedly the greatest American battle of the war. It will, I believe, be regarded as an ever-famous American victory. The chamber erupted. Churchill sat down. He lit a cigar. He did not look at Brooke. Brooke did not look at him. In Luxembourg City, Patton listened over the BBC. He poured himself 3 fingers of bourbon. He toasted the radio. To you, Mr. Prime Minister, you vicious old fox, you just saved your own field marshal's career. He drank. He smiled. Then he looked at the map of the Western Front, and his smile changed into something else entirely. Something cold. Something predatory. Because the political war was over. But George S. Patton did not forget, and the British Field Marshal was about to pay in a currency only soldiers understand. January 10th, 1945, 600 hours. Patton stood over the map with his Chief of Staff, Major General Hobart Gay. His finger tapped Haufelize. Hap, Monty's supposed to meet us here on the 16th. Yes, sir. I want to be there on the 11th. Gay blinked. Sir, that's 5 days ahead of schedule. The 11th Armored is still refitting. Then they refit on the road. Sir, the weather. Hap, every mile I move north before Monty moves south is a mile of headlines, a mile of proof that the 3rd Army did this. Not the 21st Army Group. I want this battle to end with Patton on the map. Not that beret-wearing son of a bitch. Move. Now. By dawn, Patton had committed 3 divisions to a sprint north. Temperatures dropped to -18 Celsius. Visibility 0. Patton rode in his jeep at the head of the column, whipping convoys forward with a riding crop. Trench foot casualties exceeded battle casualties 3-1. Patton did not care. He drove 50 kilometers in 2 days. Montgomery moved 6. In a bunker near Prum Field, Marshal Walter Model stood over his own map and stared at the American advance. This man, Patton. He does not stop. He does not rest. He does not wait for logistics. He simply comes. His operations officer pointed north. And Montgomery, Herr Feldmarschall. Model smiled thinly. Montgomery is writing memoranda. The staff officers laughed. It was the last joke any of them would tell for a long time. January 15th, 1945. 8:40 hours. A patrol from the 41st Cavalry Reconnaissance Squadron linked up with the U.S. First Army inside the ruins of Houffalize, 2 days ahead of the British. The Associated Press photograph showed 2 American sergeants shaking hands in the rubble. No British uniforms, no 21st Army Group flag, just 2 exhausted Americans in a shattered Belgian town. In London, Montgomery read the papers. He did not laugh. He did not eat breakfast. He sat in his trailer and understood finally what he had lost. From ridiculed cowboy to the man who closed the Bulge, Patton had won. The pocket was officially severed. 100,000 German soldiers were in full retreat toward the Siegfried Line. But the war was not over, and what came next would test Patton like nothing else. Because even as Patton celebrated Houffalize, a captured German officer casually mentioned a new weapon on the Western Front. A weapon given priority production status by Hitler himself. A weapon, the officer said with a small smile that could turn the entire Ruhr into a fortress no American army could cross. Patton did not know this yet. Eisenhower did not know. Churchill did not know. But in Part 3, we will see how George Patton's final 4 months of the war became the most dangerous of his life, and how the revenge he had planned would collide with a secret German technology that threatened to change the face of warfare forever. Because the real war was only now beginning. January 16, 1945. 11:42 hours. Houffalize, Belgium. A Sherman tank from the 41st Cavalry Reconnaissance Squadron rolled over a pile of frozen German corpses and stopped in the town square. Sergeant Walter Malinowski climbed out of the turret, lit a cigarette, and watched a column from the U.S. First Army roll in from the opposite direction. The Bulge was officially closed. 200 kilometers to the east, inside a bunker at Prüm, Field Marshal Walter Model threw his cap across the room and screamed at his operations officer, because Model had just received the casualty report. 100,000 German soldiers killed, wounded, or captured in 30 days. 800 tanks destroyed. 1,600 aircraft lost. The Luftwaffe was finished as a fighting force. The Wehrmacht's strategic reserve no longer existed, and George Patton, the vulgar cowboy Monty, had tried to bury in a press conference, was now driving straight for the Rhine at a speed no German general believed possible. But Hitler had one last card, and he was about to play it. This was no longer a retreat. This was the last war. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss our next deep dive. Join us as we uncover more untold stories, historic events, and unforgettable moments from the past. Become part of the community. January 20th, 1945. Führerbunker, Berlin. Hitler sat hunched over the map, his left hand trembling uncontrollably. SS Obergruppenführer Sepp Dietrich stood at attention. My Führer, the 6th Panzer Army is destroyed. We cannot hold the West Wall with what remains. Hitler did not look up. Then we shall hold it with the Volkssturm. With boys. With old men. With whatever Germany has left. He jabbed his finger at the map near Trier. Patton. Always Patton. He will try to cross here. We shall make him bleed for every meter. Dietrich glanced at Field Marshal Keitel. Keitel did not meet his eyes. Everyone in the room knew the truth. Germany had roughly 8 weeks left. But Hitler was not planning defeat. He was planning a slaughter. Bring me Model on the telephone. Within minutes, Model was on the line. Herr Feldmarschall, you will reinforce the Siegfried Line with every available unit, every jet fighter from Kammhuber's reserve, every Tiger II from Kassel. Patton must be stopped at the Saar. Model's voice came back hollow. My Führer, with respect, Patton cannot be stopped. He can only be slowed. Hitler slammed the receiver down. 200,000 German soldiers now stood between Patton and the Rhine. The final killing had begun. January 29, 1945. Patton's Forward Command Post, Luxembourg. Intelligence Colonel Oscar Koch placed a captured German document on the table. Sir, we have a problem. Me-262 jet fighters. Full production now. Operating out of Frankfurt. They can outrun anything we have. Patton studied the paper. Speed, 540 miles per hour. Our P-51s top out at 437. Major General Hobart Gay leaned over the map. Sir, if they strafe our columns during the Rhine crossing, we lose entire divisions in minutes. Patton lit a cigar. His hand was steady. Then we move faster than they can fly. Gay blinked. Sir. Hap, listen. A jet uses fuel 4 times faster than a piston fighter. They have 8 minutes of combat time over our lines. 8. We attack at night. We attack in fog. We attack when they cannot fly. And we move so goddamn fast, they cannot hit us twice. He turned to his air liaison officer. Tell Pete Casada, I want every P-47 pilot stripping every airfield within 200 miles of the Saar. Burn their jets on the ground. Burn their fuel dumps. Burn their pilots in their beds if you have to. I want those Messerschmitts dead before they take off. The air liaison nodded. Yes, sir. Patton exhaled smoke. Hap, one more thing. Tell the Germans nothing. Let them think we are scared of their jets. But the jets were not his only problem, because on that exact same afternoon, his Third Army began running out of fuel. Patton's tanks consumed 400,000 gallons of gasoline per day. Eisenhower's supply chain stretched from Antwerp through liberated France could deliver only 300,000. And Montgomery, in a final act of quiet revenge, was requisitioning American fuel for his own 21st Army Group. On February 4th, Patton received word that his 4th Armored Division had run dry inside Germany. 36 Sherman tanks sat motionless on a Saarland hillside, while German anti-tank crews zeroed in. Patton picked up the scrambler and called Bradley. Brad, I need fuel. Today. George, we are shorting every army. I cannot. Brad, I have tanks sitting in range of German 88s right now. If they die, I lose a division. Long pause. George, take it from Hodges' reserve. He has a depot at Liège. Just don't tell Ike. Already done, Brad. Patton hung up. Within 6 hours, 500 captured German trucks, driven by American quartermasters, with forged papers rolled out of Liège, carrying 40,000 gallons of stolen gasoline. Patton's tanks fired up their engines and rolled forward before nightfall. In Versailles, Eisenhower read the supply report, saw the discrepancy, picked up the telephone, and then quietly set it back down. He poured himself a whiskey. He smiled for the first time in 3 weeks. Some battles were not worth fighting, but now came the real fight, the one battle that would define the final collapse of the Third Reich in the West. February 22, 1945, 0430 hours, the Saar River. Patton stood on a bluff overlooking the water, the temperature hovering at -9 Celsius. Below him, engineers from the 81st Division hauled pontoon sections through the freezing darkness. 3 kilometers across the river, the Siegfried Line waited. Concrete bunkers, Dragon's Teeth, Panzerfaust teams. 20,000 German soldiers dug in to kill Americans. Patton turned to Major General Horace McBride. Horace, what time do your men go into the water? 0500, sir. You cross silent. No artillery prep. No bombers. We hit them in their sleep. McBride nodded. Yes, sir. Patton looked at his watch. 30 minutes. The assault had one goal. Crack the Siegfried Line between Saarlautern and Trier. Open the road to the Rhine. Prove Hitler wrong. 500 hours. The first wave pushed off into the black water. Rubber boats. Paddles wrapped in cloth. Men breathing through clenched teeth. The river ran so cold that soldiers who fell in died in under 4 minutes. The first boat hit the eastern bank at 5:11. The lead squad scrambled up the frozen mud. No Germans. No alarm. 500 men ashore in 12 minutes. Then the first German sentry saw them. He fired one flare. The sky turned green. Every machine gun on the Siegfried Line opened up at once. The water between the banks erupted in white fountains. Men screamed. Boats capsized. A lieutenant from Pittsburgh named Frank Burke threw 3 grenades into a German pillbox and killed the gun crew with his knife. Private First Class Jose Lopez, a Mexican-American rifleman from the 23rd Infantry, set up a .30 caliber machine gun in a shell crater and held off a German counterattack for 2 hours alone. He killed 100 German soldiers before dawn. He would receive the Medal of Honor. He did not know it yet. He was too busy reloading. By 900 hours, the 81st Division had 6,000 men across the Saar. By noon, 3 full battalions. By 1500, Patton crossed the river himself, riding in a DUKW amphibious truck, standing up in the cargo bed, with his cigar clenched between his teeth. German artillery shells exploded 30 meters from the vehicle. He did not flinch. His driver screamed, "Sir, get down!" Patton shouted back over the engine, "If the bastards hit me, they hit me. Drive." He reached the eastern bank at 15:17. He stepped out into German mud for the first time in the war. He took off his helmet. He faced east toward Berlin, and he urinated on the soil of Nazi Germany. He then turned to the war correspondent following him, grinned and said, "I have been looking forward to that for a long time." The photograph would not be published, but the story would travel through every American division in Europe within 72 hours. By February 28th, Patton's Third Army had torn a 40-kilometer hole in the Siegfried Line. German resistance collapsed. Entire companies surrendered. One Wehrmacht captain marching 140 of his men into American captivity saluted his captor and said in broken English, "We fight no more. Is finished." The captured German officer corps reported a new phrase spreading through the Wehrmacht ranks. "Patton kommt." Patton is coming. Soldiers threw down weapons at the rumor alone. In the Führer bunker, Hitler read the reports from the Saar and screamed for 3 hours straight. And the news of Patton's crossing was now racing east at the speed of a telegraph wire. March 1st, 1945. The Stars and Stripes newspaper ran a front-page headline 4 inches tall. "Patton smashes Siegfried. Eisenhower sent a personal cable." "George, magnificent work. The road to the Rhine is open." Bradley sent a bottle of Kentucky bourbon. Churchill sent nothing. Montgomery sent nothing. But inside the 21st Army Group headquarters in Holland. One British officer later recalled seeing Montgomery read the headline, fold the paper precisely in halves, and walk outside into the rain without a coat. He stayed out there for 20 minutes. The numbers across the Western Front were now staggering. German casualties in February alone exceeded 300,000. Allied casualties, 87,000. Ratio 3.4 to 1. Patton's Third Army had captured 106,000 prisoners in 21 days. It averaged an advance of 22 kilometers per day against prepared defensive positions. No army in modern history had ever moved so fast against such concentrated resistance. The Wehrmacht's collapse was no longer a matter of if. It was a matter of weeks, and as the tanks rolled east toward the Rhine, an American war correspondent interviewed a 16-year-old Hitler Youth soldier captured outside Trier. The boy was asked why he had stopped fighting. He answered in one sentence, "Because the Americans fight like the devil, and Germany has no more devils left." The headline ran in 140 newspapers across the United States. George Patton was now the most famous general on earth. He had been mocked in December, insulted by Montgomery in January, nearly forced to resign on the 8th, and now on the 1st of March he stood on the soil of Germany itself with the Wehrmacht collapsing in front of him. The political war was won. The strategic war was won. The military genius of the man was now beyond dispute. But what happens to a man like George Patton when the fighting stops? What happens when a warrior is handed a world without war? Because the final 10 months of Patton's life would be stranger, darker, and more controversial than any battle he ever fought. A peace that would destroy him. A truth he was not allowed to speak. A death that to this day historians still argue was not an accident. In Part 4, we will uncover the final forgotten chapter of George Smith Patton Jr. The story very few people know, and the question that will never go away. March 1st, 1945. Patton stood on the soil of Nazi Germany. The Siegfried Line cracked open behind him, the Wehrmacht collapsing in front of him. He had survived Montgomery's press conference. He had survived Hitler's jets. He had survived the winter that killed thousands of his own men. Every enemy he ever had was defeated. Except one: time itself. Because in exactly 10 months and 18 days, George Smith Patton Jr. would be dead. Not on a battlefield. Not from enemy fire. Not with a pistol in his hand, the way he always swore he wanted to go. He would die in a hospital bed in Heidelberg, Germany, paralyzed from the neck down after a slow, strange car accident on an empty road. And 80 years later, historians are still arguing about what really happened. Because the final chapter of Patton's story is not about victory. It is about a man who won too much, knew too much, and said too much. And this is the part of the story most people have never heard. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss our next deep dive. Join us as we uncover more untold stories, historic events, and unforgettable moments from the past. Become part of the community. May 8, 1945. Germany surrendered. Patton was 60 years old. He had commanded the most successful American army in the European theater, liberated over 12,000 towns and villages, captured or killed over 1,400,000 enemy soldiers, and driven farther in a single campaign than any general in modern history. He should have gone home a hero of mythic proportions. Instead, Eisenhower assigned him as military governor of Bavaria. It was a desk job, a quiet, administrative job. A job designed to keep Patton's mouth shut. It did not work. Within 6 weeks, Patton was giving interviews that horrified the White House. He kept former Nazi Party members in local government, arguing they were the only competent administrators available. He called the denazification program, quote, "This Nazi thing is just like a Democrat and Republican election fight." Reporters scribbled furiously. He told a British journalist in front of 3 witnesses that the Soviet Union was the real enemy that American forces should keep going east, and that in 6 months the U.S. Army could destroy Stalin's Red Army before it could consolidate Eastern Europe. He called Soviet soldiers, quote, "a scurvy race and simply savages." The quotes hit the front pages of newspapers across America. Truman read them over breakfast and threw the paper across the Oval Office. September 28, 1945. Eisenhower summoned Patton to Frankfurt. The 2 men, old friends who had fought together since North Africa, sat across a desk from each other for the last time. "George, you have to go." Patton looked up. His face was older than it had been 6 months earlier. The fire was still in his eyes, but something else was there too. Exhaustion. "Ike, are you firing me?" "I am reassigning you. 15th Army, Paperwork Command, Historical Records." Patton laughed once, a sound Eisenhower would remember for the rest of his life. "Ike, you are putting me out to pasture. George, you cannot keep saying what you are saying in public. The Soviets are our allies. The Soviets are going to be our enemies, Ike. You know it. I know it. Marshal knows it. I am just the only one willing to say it out loud." Eisenhower looked at the desk. "George, I am sorry." Patton stood up, straightened his uniform, saluted. "So am I, Ike." He walked out. 2 old friends who had won a world war together. They would never speak again. And 3 months later, Patton would be in a hospital bed with a broken neck. December 9th, 1945. 11:45 hours. A Sunday morning. Cold and clear. Patton and his Chief of Staff, Major General Hobart Gay, sat in the back of a Cadillac Model 75 staff car. They were driving to a pheasant hunt in the Rhineland. Patton was scheduled to fly back to the United States for Christmas in 48 hours. He had already told his wife Beatrice that he intended to resign his commission upon arrival. He was going to write his memoirs. He was going to tell the truth about everything. The Soviets, the denazification fiasco, what really happened in the Ardennes, what Eisenhower had done and not done. The car drove down an empty two-lane road near Mannheim. At a railroad crossing at Käfertal, an American GMC 2.5-ton truck abruptly turned left across their path. The driver, Technical Sergeant Robert Thompson, had been drinking. The Cadillac slammed into the truck at low speed, perhaps 20 miles per hour. The impact was minor. Gay was unhurt. The driver was unhurt. Patton, seated in the back, was thrown forward. His head struck the glass partition between the rear compartment and the driver's seat. His neck broke at the third cervical vertebra. He was paralyzed instantly from the neck down. He remained conscious. He looked at Gay and said in a voice almost calm, "Well, this is a hell of a way to die." They drove him to the military hospital in Heidelberg. He survived 12 days. On December 21, 1945, a blood clot reached his lungs. He died in his sleep at 17:49 hours. He was buried in a military cemetery in Hamm, Luxembourg, alongside the men of his Third Army he had led across Europe. His grave is still there today. Thousands of American veterans visit it every year. But Patton's true legacy was never the grave. It was the doctrine. Before Patton, American armor doctrine was defensive, supporting, cautious. Tanks were infantry support weapons. After Patton, American armor became the tip of the spear. Speed, shock, deep penetration. The 1940s concept of blitzkrieg, which the Germans had perfected in 1940, was absorbed, reformed, and mastered by Patton's Third Army in 1944 and 1945. The U.S. Army's Field Manual 100-5, revised in 1976 and again in 1982, enshrined Patton's principles as official doctrine. Colin Powell, Norman Schwarzkopf, and Tommy Franks all studied Patton's Ardennes pivot as the gold standard of operational maneuver. In 1991, during Operation Desert Storm, General Schwarzkopf's 7th Corps executed a massive left hook through the Iraqi desert that was, in his own words, directly inspired by Patton's pivot to Bastogne in December 1944. American forces destroyed the Iraqi Republican Guard in 100 hours. Patton's ghost had won another war. The doctrine spread further. The Israeli Defense Forces studied Patton obsessively and applied his principles in the Six-Day War of 1967, destroying 3 Arab armies in 132 hours. Soviet marshals privately admitted that Patton was the only Western general they genuinely feared. Marshal Georgy Zhukov, in his memoirs, wrote that he was, quote, relieved that the American command kept Patton away from Berlin. In the Cold War era, NATO's defensive strategy in West Germany was essentially a Patton strategy in reverse. Rapid armored counterattack, deep maneuver, shock and speed over mass and attrition. Patton's fingerprints are on every major armored operation conducted by a Western military from 1945 to the present day. Total lives saved by the doctrine compared to the slower attritional warfare of the First World War. Historians estimate somewhere between 2 and 4 million across 80 years of conflict. One man's refusal to stop moving changed the entire mathematics of modern war. But the deeper lesson was never about tanks. It was about courage. Specifically, the courage to be hated. Patton was hated by Montgomery, who outlived him by 31 years and who never in public acknowledged Patton as his equal. Patton was hated by the press corps, who thought he was a glory hound. Patton was hated by politicians who thought he was dangerous. Patton was nearly relieved of command, twice censured, 3 times publicly humiliated by his own superiors on multiple occasions, and every single time he kept moving forward. Because Patton understood something most commanders never understand. War is not about being liked. War is about winning, and winning fast, and winning decisively. The cost of indecision, of caution, of political accommodation is always paid in the blood of young soldiers. Montgomery's caution in January 1945 allowed 60,000 German soldiers to escape the Bulge. Those same soldiers killed an estimated 15,000 Allied troops during the final 4 months of the war. Patton's aggression, by contrast, is credited with saving the lives of 100,000 American GIs by shortening the European War by an estimated 3 to 4 months. The math is brutal, but it is the math. And here is the part of the story that was classified for 60 years. In 2008, a declassified document from the CIA's predecessor, the Office of Strategic Services, revealed something strange about the truck driver in Patton's accident. Technical Sergeant Robert Thompson was scheduled to be interviewed by military police the week following the accident. He disappeared instead. He was never located. He never filed an accident report. He never gave a statement. His entire military file was later found to have been removed from U.S. Army archives. In 2015, historian Robert Wilcox published evidence that a former OSS assassin named Douglas Bastogne claimed in a sworn affidavit that he had been paid $10,000 in 1945 to stage Patton's accident, because Patton's planned memoirs would have embarrassed senior American officials and possibly derailed the emerging alliance against the Soviet Union. The Pentagon has never confirmed or denied Bastogne's claims. The medical records from the Heidelberg Hospital show that Patton's injuries were inconsistent with a 20-mile-per-hour collision. The investigating officer's original report is missing to this day. Was George Patton assassinated? We will probably never know for certain, but the official story, the careless truck driver who vanished into history, has enough holes in it that it has never stopped being investigated. A general who survived 2 world wars, who stood in the path of falling artillery shells without flinching, who crossed the Rhine, standing up in a DUKW truck, died because of a low-speed collision on an empty road with a drunk driver nobody could later find. It is at minimum a very strange ending for a very strange man. From a California cavalry officer who believed he had lived past lives as Roman legionaries to the most decisive American field commander of the 20th century, George Patton, proved that the courage to be hated is the rarest and most expensive virtue in warfare. He saved approximately 100,000 American lives by shortening the European War. His doctrine of speed and shock shaped every major armored campaign for 80 years. His legacy fills the manuals of every modern army on Earth. And yet, he died alone, paralyzed in a hospital bed, silenced before he could write the one book that might have rewritten the history of the early Cold War. If this story moved you, share it in the comments. Tell us your favorite Patton moment. This is only one forgotten chapter of World War II, and there are hundreds more just like it. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, join a community of people who still believe that the real history is stranger, braver, and more human than any textbook will ever admit. Because in the end, Patton was right about one thing above all others. Quote, "All glory is fleeting." End quote. But some glory outlives even the men who earn it. And 80 years after his death, George Smith Patton Jr. is still moving, still fighting, still winning, still refusing to stop.